on The Fact Today, only on ATN.
The international news on Atlantic Television Network. First, the headlines. Tunisia, public prosecutor detains prominent activist. Amman, Israeli settlers attack humanitarian aid convoy, Jordan says. Seoul, South Korean town shaking up by K9 experiences worst climate disaster ever, death toll rises. Australia, Victorian woman allegedly forced to marry older man. In other news and details, Tunisia's public prosecutor on Tuesday detained Sadia Mosba, a prominent activist and head of a non-governmental group that defends the rights of migrants, human rights groups said, hours after President Kais Saied accused some groups that defend sub-Saharan migrants of treason. Some groups helping migrants in a move critics say aims to African countries was a conspiracy to change the country's demographic makeup, prompting the African Union to condemn what it called Tunisia's hate speech against migrants. Tunisia has replaced Libya as the region's main departure point for people fleeing poverty and conflict in Africa and the Middle East in the hope of a better life in Europe. The United States has halted a shipment of powerful bombs to Israel, a U.S. official said, as Washington and its ally to avoid a full-scale invasion of the Gaza Strip's crowded southern city of Rafah and gives more time for ceasefire talks. Refuge from combat elsewhere in the enclave, residents said the fighting was still on the outskirts. This would be the first such delay since the Biden administration offered its full support to Israel after Hamas's October 7 attack. Washington is Israel's closest ally and main weapons supplier. A senior Israeli official, asking not to be named, said, "If we have to fight with our fingernails, then we will do what we have." The sick and injured via a border crossing with Egypt are at a standstill due to Israel's military operation, doctors and residents said on Tuesday. The Abu Yusuf al-Najjar hospital is located in an area of southern Gaza the Israeli army has designated a combat zone in a conflict that has seen repeated Israeli attack on hospitals. With only a third still operational, Israel justifies such attacks by saying that Hamas uses them for military purposes, a claim both hospital staff and Hamas deny. Dr. Marwan al-Hams said Israel had put Abu Yusuf al-Najjar hospital at the center of the battlefield. Its threat to it resulted in people and patients leaving the hospital, he said, adding that some medical crew had also left. The dialysis department for patients with kidney disease remained open for now, he added. World Health Organization spokesperson Margaret Harris warned that its closure would immediately endanger the lives of some 200 dialysis patients since it is the only one in Gaza. If they are shut down, that means all those people will die simply from kidney failure because that is what is keeping them alive, she said. Other medical services in Rafah have already been disrupted, with some services suspended. The Rafah crossing to Egypt has been seized by Israel and shut, preventing both medical evacuations of the sick and wounded and imports of medicines, medical aid groups say. The Gaza Health Ministry said 140 patients were scheduled to leave the besieged enclave on Tuesday for treatment. Today my name was at order and I should travel to get my legs treated. Lama Abu Holi, an 8-year-old girl at Al-Aqsa Hospital with injuries to two limbs, told the press. Because the border crossing is shut today, I cannot travel. I am upset. Mohammed Abu Skil, a doctor working in Gaza's Kuwaiti hospital, said the halt to patient transfers would fill up hospital beds and burden the medical system further. Jordan said on Tuesday Israeli settlers attacked a humanitarian aid convoy on its way to Erez crossing in northern Gaza and tampered with its contents in the second such incident in less than a week. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Sufyan Kuda said the convoy, which goes through the Jordan, holds Israel responsible for the attack by extremist settlers. It constitutes a breach of its legal obligations as an occupying power, Kuda said. A team of mid-ranking Israeli officials have arrived in Cairo to assess whether the Islamic Palestinian group Hamas can be persuaded to shift on its latest ceasefire offer, a senior Israeli official said on Tuesday. The official earlier reiterated that the current Hamas proposal was unacceptable to Israel. This delegation is made up of mid-level envoys. Were there a credible deal in the offing, the principals would be heading the delegation, the official said, referring to the senior officials from the intelligence services, Mossad and Shin Bet, who are leading the Israeli side. The team's arrival in the Egyptian capital came hours after Israeli tanks took control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Israeli jets have carried out repeated strikes on eastern Rafah, the city in southern Gaza where more than 1 million Palestinians displaced by the 7-month war have been sheltering. Egypt's state-aligned Al TV reported that there were still efforts by the two sides to contain the escalation, but an Israeli government spokesperson said in a briefing earlier that Israel's objective remains to destroy Hamas. We are always open to a diplomatic resolution, but I must tell you that this operation in Rafah is designed to destroy the last 4 battalions of Hamas. This country will be protected and Hamas will be completely annihilated, said David Manser. Egyptian officials have asked Israel to stop the Rafah operation immediately. Hamas issued a statement saying the Rafah operation was designed to undermine ceasefire efforts. An emergency text message alerting residents of a rural South Korean town to watch out for 70 ferocious dogs on the loose had to be quickly withdrawn after it turned out only 3 canines had wandered off a farm in the area, officials said. Wednesday's alert from the Donggu District Office in Danjeon followed a report from the Civic Emergency Service that a caller had reported seeing 70 large dogs roaming an area on the city's outskirts. We were trying to get the word out for people to be cautious since they said it was 70 large dogs, an official in the district south of the capital, Seoul, said by telephone. The official, who declined to be identified, said the district office had erred on the side of caution by issuing the alert based on the initial witness report in case the animals proved to be a threat to the public. A second alert issued 20 minutes later said only 3 dogs had escaped from the farm and had been recovered. A police officer stationed in the area confirmed the not very large animals were all back at the farm. Hundreds of farms in South Korea keep dogs, but in this case, the animals appear to have been pets or working dogs. Hong Kong's Court of Appeal Wednesday granted an application platforms operators and technology firms such as Google. Court of Appeal judges Jeremy Poon, Carl Chu and Anthea Pang wrote that the composer of the protest song had intended it to be used as a weapon. In the hands of those with the intention to incite secession and sedition, the song can be deployed to arouse anti-establishment sentiments, the judges wrote. The judges added that an injunction is necessary to persuade the IPOs to remove the problematic videos in connection with the song from their platforms. Although the IPOs have not taken part in these proceedings, they have indicated that they are ready to accede to the government's request if there is a court order. Freewheeling Hong Kong returned from British to Chinese rule in 1997 with the guarantee its freedoms would be preserved under a one-country, two-system formula. Hong Kong does not have its own anthem. Glory to Hong Kong was written in 2019 amid mass pro-democracy protests that year and was considered an unofficial national anthem rather than China's March of the Volunteers. The court ruling targets those who broadcast or distribute the song with the intention of inciting others to commit secession, or those who suggest Hong Kong is an independent state or who insults the national anthem. Exceptions would only be granted to lawful academic and journalistic activities, the judges added. The Hong Kong government sought an appeal after High Court Judge Anthony Chan refused to ban the protest anthem last July, saying that it could undermine freedom of expression and cause potential chilling effects. Soon after Wednesday's ruling, some links to the song on YouTube identified the injunction were removed. The government applied for the injunction last June after it was mistakenly played at several international events as the official anthem, including a rugby sevens game and an ice hockey competition. Google gave no immediate response to a request for comment. It had earlier said it wouldn't change its search results to display China's national anthem rather than the protest songs when users search for Hong Kong's national anthem. DGX Music, the music group behind the song, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The song was banned in Hong Kong schools after China imposed a national security law in 2020. In March, authorities enacted another set of national security laws that some foreign governments say further undermine rights and free speech. Beijing rejects the accusations and says the security laws have brought stability. A court in Pakistan granted a request on Wednesday by the wife of former Prime Minister Imran Khan to be moved to jail, her lawyers said, instead of the house arrest ordered by the government. In her petition to the Islamabad High Court, Bushra Bibi had accused authorities of violating her privacy and serving contaminated food in her home cell, which she and her lawyers said was dominated by men, a charge the prison staff has denied. Bibi says she has been detained in one serving his 14-year sentence, his party said in a statement. The party said Bibi's shift to jail will answer critics that her stay at home instead of prison was part of some deal to seek concessions from the government. Pakistan Army spokesperson Major General Ahmed Sharif said on Tuesday, in response to a question, that it was not possible to open talks for any deal with the party that had been involved in attacks against the state institutions. He was referring to Khan party supporters storming and burning military installations on May 9th last year to protest against the former cricketer's arrest, saying those behind the attacks needed to seek forgiveness before asking for any negotiations. Asad Qasser, a close aide of Khan, said that any kind of apology was out of the question. Khan was ousted from power in 2022, which he blamed on a conspiracy backed by the military after he had fallen out with powerful army generals. The military has denied the accusation. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has drawn up new targets to boost farmer incomes as he seeks to secure his legacy of reforming the world's largest democracy and tries to assuage a key voting bloc delusioned by his government's past failures. Modi, who is eyeing a rare third term in ongoing elections, wants to lift rural per capita income by 50% by 2025 2030, according to documents reviewed. He plans to raise incomes in the hinterland by increasing corporate investments in agriculture to 25% of the overall investment in the sector from 15% now, and increase non-farm jobs through strengthening small-scale industries, the document prepared by Modi's administration show. Modi's focus on reforming the agricultural sector and improving the rural standard of living is crucial to sustain India's fastest-growing tag without increasing inequality between urban and rural Indians that has worsened during his term. While agriculture occupies a shrinking share of India's GDP, it still accounts for more than 40% of the labor force. Milan Vaishnav in politics and economy at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace think tank. I think Modi's economic legacy will at least in part on what happens to this large share of rural dwellers, but having failed to double farmer incomes by 2022 as promised in 2016, during his first tenure, the new targets are less ambitious and are likely to face skepticism in many parts of the rural community. Modi's last big reform push was met with violent protests by farmers that forced him to repeal 3 farm laws in 2021 aimed at increasing corporate participation and deregulating the sector that accounts for about 20% of the economy. Modi has set out a broad plan for the country of 1.4 billion to become a developed nation by 2047, when it will mark 100 years of freedom from British rule, and transformation of the farm sector is key to that objective. By then, Modi wants corporate investments in agriculture to jump to more than 40% by 2047, which will aid mechanized farming, develop more warehouses, cold storage facilities, and food processing units. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We will be back after this break.
People into the country illegally. That is amazing. You human
on the point of order.
Honorable
They are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics,
Nobody's ambition is what's the blood.
I have fought very firmly. Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. The rest of our stories. UN agencies said on Tuesday the two main crossings into the southern Gaza Strip remained shut, virtually cutting off the Palestinian enclave from outside aid with few stocks positioned inside. The global agency's humanitarian office spokesperson Jen Selek told journalists Israel had shut both the Rafah and Kerem Shalom crossings for aid and people as part of its military operation in Rafah, where around 1 million uprooted people are sheltering. The Israeli military said a limited operation in Rafah was meant to kill fighters and dismantle infrastructure used by Hamas, which governs the besieged Palestinian territory. The two main arteries for getting aid into Gaza are currently choked off, Larrick said, adding UN agencies had very low stocks inside the Gaza Strip since humanitarian supplies were consumed immediately. The enclave has just a one-day buffer of fuel stock, he said. If no fuel comes in for a prolonged period of time, it would be a very effective way of putting the humanitarian operation in its grave, he said. A World Health Organization spokesperson said in response to a journalist's question that no exceptions were being made for sick and injured patients. While some non-fuel supplies have entered Gaza via the northern areas crossing, in recent days the UN agency said this was insufficient and difficult to deliver to Rafah since it meant crossing active combat zones. Whereas will simply not be enough, said James Elder, a spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Agency. If Rafah Gate closes for an extended period, it is hard to see how famine in Gaza can be averted, he said. The World Food Programme said later on social media platform X that its stocks would only last between 1 and 4 days of the southern and central parts of Gaza, even before the latest escalation in the 7-month-old conflict. The United Nations had repeatedly accused Israel of restricting aid access despite famine warnings. Faced with growing international pressure, Israel improved access but says UN agencies are to blame for not distributing aid more efficiently within the enclave. UN agencies said they had pre-stocked some aid within Rafah but said there were very low supplies of water and high energy nutrition supplies needed to treat malnourished children. Russia said on Wednesday that the war in Gaza was escalating due to Israel's incursion into Rafah and that Moscow so far saw no prospect for a peace settlement in Gaza or the wider Middle East. Israel invaded Rafah, a southern Gazan city where more than 1 million displaced Palestinian civilians have sought shelter from Israel's offensive throughout the tiny territory. An additional destabilizing factor, including for the entire region, was the launch of an Israeli military ground operation in Rafah. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova told reporters about 1.5 million Palestinian civilians are concentrated there. We demand strict compliance with the provisions of international humanitarian law. Speaking more broadly about efforts to find a lasting settlement in the Middle East, Zakharova said, "I would like to call it a settlement, but alas, it is far from a settlement. There are no prospects for resolving the situation in the Gaza Strip. On the contrary, the situation in the conflict zone is escalating daily." The war began when Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7, killing about 1,200 people and abducting 250 others, of whom 133 are believed to remain in captivity in Gaza, according to Israel tallies. Israel's offensive has 55,000 Palestinians, most of them civilians, in the conflict, the Gaza Health Ministry said. Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog will continue talks aimed at ending an impasse on many issues between them and should strike a deal on package of measures soon, the watchdog's chief Rafael Grossi said on Tuesday as he returned. The International Atomic Energy Agency faces a range of difficulties in Iran, including the fact Tehran only implemented a small fraction of what Grossi thought it committed to in a joint statement on future operation they made in March 2023, and the few concrete steps stopped in June of last year. Speaking to reporters in Isfahan, resuming monitoring of activities introduced by a 2015 deal between Iran and major powers, but then scrapped As the deal unraveled after the U.S. pullout in 2018, they also included addressing Iran's decision last year to ban many of the IAEA's top enrichment experts assigned to the country, he said. A years-long investigation into unexplained uranium traces at undeclared sites was also mentioned. We continue interactions over unresolved issues, including issues regarding 2 sites, Eslami told his news conference with Grossi. Iran is enriching uranium to impurity close to the around 90% of weapons grade. If that material were enriched, Iran denies seeking nuclear weapons, but no other state has enriched to that level without producing them. When asked if Iran was demanding that sanctions be lifted in exchange for nuclear steps, which would be beyond IAEA's remit and require discussions. The complex aspects about this is that there are a lot of political things involved, some of them within my purview, some of them not, he said. So when it comes to lifting of sanctions and things from the opposition VMRO DPMNE party in the first round of presidential elections last month suggest that voters